Hello and welcome to a presentation of all the new features of Cut2D Pro version 9.5. Before we move on to individual demonstrations, let's take a summary look at all the features that have been added. As you can see, Cut2D Pro has improvements within the areas of infrastructure, drawing and machining, whether that be the automatic download and entering of your license code to get your software working, some significant improvements to text creation and editing, as well as the new picture editor and the ability to crop bitmaps to vectors, and the new improved support for helical ramps. As part of our expansion of cloud-based services, we've introduced the ability to automatically download and enter your registered username and license code in order to get your software working. Now, previously with version 9.5, at worst you'd have to manually type in that registered username and license code, or at best be able to copy and paste that from an email you may have received. However, with version 9.5, when connected to your customer account V&Co, the license can be automatically downloaded in order to get your software working. If you don't have internet connection, you can still use the manual typed option. So with that, let's start a session of the software. And immediately you'll get this message, as this is the first time we started it. Do I want to enter my details through online or manual entry? So I'm going to go online. I'll then be prompted to log in to my V&Co account. This will direct to portal.vectric.com, your login page. I'm going to enter my email address and the password which I created when I accepted the invitation to the account. And once I've directed in now, so that's validated that, I then will get the message pop up on the screen that the software has been licensed to Joe Bloggs Vectric, which is my registered username, and hit the finish button and my software starts. For version 9.5 there are significant improvements to the way text is created and edited. If we look back to version 9, you would only ever see the text placed on the screen after completing the entries in the form. There was no dynamic modification, so if you're changing, for instance, the height or the justification, then you would need to apply that in order to see the effect on the screen. And also any transformations to the text would be reset when editing the text content. For instance, if you'd rotated the text, scaled it, mirrored it, etc., and then wanted to make a change, those changes were all lost and the text was presented in its original location. Whereas for 9.5, when you start by clicking on the screen, which will show a text box showing its start position, its height and its alignment, and the text would begin to be displayed as soon as you enter the first character. So we can see also we have dynamic modification. If you're changing the font or the height, then that will immediately be updated on the screen without having to apply. And most importantly is any transformations to the text are maintained when editing the text content, and that applies when rotating the text, whether you've wrapped it along a curve, whether you've modified its kerning, also some non-proportional scaling or mirroring. That's all maintained if you go ahead and edit that text at a later point. Okay, so we've got the same part in version 9.5, and like we did with version 9, we'll take a look at some of the simple fundamental issues that we have and see whether these have been remedied with version 9.5. Now I'm going to go to the draw text function, and you can immediately see here it's given me a location for where that text is going to start, and wherever I click you can see that I've got a text box representing the text alignment, whether that's right, center or middle. You can see that's being changed dynamically on the screen there. And you've got the height, so if I change that to say 2, you can see that immediately being updated on the screen, and back down to say 1, and you can see that location being placed. So immediately after that, I don't have to come up to the text entry text box. I can simply start typing canoe and we'll see the letters on the screen. Great. So now, as we did before, I'm going to just mid-flow, which is nice here, I'm going to click on that, scale that down now. Okay, I'm happy with that. And then add in ing to create canoeing, and as you can see, that kept that transformation. Now similarly, if I want to rotate that, what we had to do in version 9 was to come out of the text entry, because the transformation box there did not have the rotation anchors, but they are now here. So I can just rotate that and maybe come back in and type in kayak, and as you can see there, it's kept the rotation and the scaling. And similarly with the kerning, that would also be maintained. So you can see it's a big leap forward with the creation and editing of text, because typically we don't always get things right first time, or quite often we like to use templates for text where we then come in and just update the font or update the text entry, particularly if you're making plaques, for instance, where you might have sort of template text that's just edited to be different dates or different names. So I'm just going to delete that out now, and we're going to get rid of that text and come in and look at the sign here itself, and going to create the first word, which is rowing. So I'm going to just plonk that there. You can immediately see that that is the wrong height, so I'm going to change that to 1, and I'm going to add rowing into this location. And similarly, like we did before, I'm just going to shift and pick that outer curve and align to the center of that vector. Now that was simple here. And now we're going to add in the word Salisbury into this region here, as we did with version 9. So straight into the text, I'm just going to say create it down here, and I'm going to type in SALSBURY and close out that form. Going to shift now and pick that out of vector, do the text on a curve, and we're going to align to the curve. We're going to be on the other side, and we need to apply an offset of 0.25. Okay, and we can now see that letters, but the spacing's not quite right, so I'm going to need to increase that up until that is right. Okay, I'm happy with that. Close that out. And just like I did with version 9, I've suddenly realized that I've spelt it incorrectly. So I'm going to come back in now to the text form and just change that L to an I, and that's kept the spacing, and it's just replaced the L with an I. So that is perfect. That saved me a hell of a lot of time. So I'm just going to close out that form. We'll switch on the other text the other side for association, and now I'm going to come up and create my 2 dates here. So simply come in with the text, place it somewhere around about here, and this is going to be 1934. Immediately I can see it's the wrong height, so I'm just going to change that to 0.8. Okay, and mid-flow I can actually click on it, rotate it, just get it into position. Okay, and just apply a bit more rotation. Okay, I'm happy with that now, and I'm going to copy that and paste it. So Control C, Control V, and just use the 9 on the keyboard to rotate. I'm going to move that now across to here. Okay, and just come back to the draw text function and change that to 2018. And as you can see, we've completed the sign in a much shorter time than we could have done with version 9, given the mistakes that we made along the way. With version 9.5, there's a significant improvement to the way we handle spiral ramp moves between toolpath profiles. Now, in version 9, helical ramps were output as a series of straight line moves. Essentially, the spiral ramp would be broken into a lot of straight line segments, which could create a very large G-code file. Whereas for 9.5, those ramps are honoured as arcs. So their output, the output is far smaller file, but it does require an updated post-processor. Now, the best way to demonstrate these differences is to output a very simple toolpath using the existing post-processor and a new one that's been adapted for the outputting of arcs. So with that, I'm going to start version 9.5 and create a new file, 5x5, and simply add a simple circle which will be centered on the job, and go straight through to machining. So the material setup very simple, just thickness 0.2, and we've got our clearance heights correct. Moving straight through to the profile toolpath, starting at 0, cut depth 0.1 with a 1/4 inch end mill. Importantly, we're going to switch on the ramps to the toolpath, and I'm going to go for the spiral option and simply calculate. So if we have a look from the side here, you can see the tool is gradually ramping down to the blue toolpath level, so you can see that very clear ramped move down to the toolpath profile. Now if we just simulate that very quickly so you can see that being cut. Okay, and now the next stage is for us to output that using the two different post processes. So let's close out of that form now and go to the save toolpath function. Okay, and I'm just going now to select the standard G-code option. So we're just going to go into the, you can see here that we've got G-code arcs and G-code helical arcs. So I'm going to select the G-code arcs here now, and we've got the arcs in inch, and I'm going to save that. Okay, so we're going to save it onto the desktop. Okay, and this is going to be called no arcs, and we'll save that. Okay, and then we're going to take the same toolpath, so I'm just going to change the post processes now and to use the helical arcs, and we'll save that and we'll put with arcs, and we'll just take a look at the difference between those two toolpaths. So they've now been saved. So I'm going to come across now and just look at the no arcs file. Okay, and we'll just simply open that up into a notepad here, and we can simply see that we have an awful lot of entries into there for what is essentially a simple ramp down to a toolpath profile. So with that, I'm just going to close the no arcs one and we'll look at the with arcs, and as you can see there, it's a far smaller file correctly output with the arcs to produce a far smaller G-code file. Okay, so let's finish by taking a summary look at all the new features that have been added to Cut2D Pro version 9.5. We started by looking at some sort of infrastructure changes in the form of the automatic download and entering of your license details when connected to your customer V&Co account. We then looked at the significant improvements to text creation and editing. Also the new picture editor functionality for changing the color characteristics, as well as being able to crop a bitmap to a vector. And then finally we looked at the new support for helical ramps, which dramatically decreases the size of the G-code file generated. So overall these represent excellent improvements over version 9.